Hello, fellow health warriors. I am so glad you joined me today on Eat, Drink, Live Longer. I'm your host, registered dietitian Liz Weiss. Today's topic is burnout. Do you find yourself running in a million directions all day long with a to-do list a mile long? Do you feel like you are burning the candle at both ends? Who can relate? Burnout is a reality for a lot of people, especially women. And yes, you guessed it, it is bad for your health. It takes a toll on the quality of our lives. Now, if you're listening to this show, you are probably like me and you want to live a long, vibrant life. You have no time for burnout, right? And, I don't either. So let's get it out of our lives. To do that, I have invited fellow dietitian Patricia Bannan to join me on the show today. Patricia is author of the new cookbook, From Burnout to Balance, 60 plus healing recipes and simple strategies to boost mood, immunity, focus, and sleep. Patricia joins me to talk about her own personal experience with burnout, how she turned it into balance, and how the foods you put on your plate can have a profound impact on improving your health and your happiness. Breakfast, main meals, salads, snacks, desserts. Ooh, I am looking at her Fudgy Avocado Walnut Brownies right now. You are going to want to make them all. Actually, yesterday, I'm not making this up, I did make Patricia's recipe for zucchini and black bean Chilaquiles skillet, and I am going to share it on the show today and on my blog. Patricia is a nationally recognized registered dietitian and healthy cooking expert. She's a busy mom, she lives in California, and she has done thousands of media interviews throughout her career. We actually go way back. She interned with me. I cannot actually remember. It was like the 1990s. Maybe it was the early 2000s. Patricia is going to have to jog my memory. Before I bring her onto the show and into the conversation to help us manage burnout and to thrive, I have a few friendly reminders. Head to lizshealthytable.com/podcast, where you will find the show notes from today's show packed with important resources. And head to lizshealthytable.com/blog for Patricia's recipe from the new cookbook for zucchini and black bean chilaquiles. Thank you, Patricia, for sharing that recipe with all of us. And now let's welcome Patricia onto the podcast. Hello, Patricia.
Hey, Liz. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for your patience during that very long introduction. It's so good to have you on. And before we get into the show, because I just kind of mentioned that you and I go way back, do you remember when we first met?
Oh my gosh, how can I forget? You were one of the first inspirations in my life, one of my first mentors. It was when I was in graduate school at Tufts. And yeah, it was early 2000s. And I worked with you in that production studio with Al Ward doing videos. And actually, one of my independent studies was creating a project for you. And I will always be grateful.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for remembering the year. I was a new mom at the time. And so my brain was probably super foggy. So definitely the early 2000s. And, I've had a podcast, you guys, since like 2008. And Patricia's done thousands of interviews during her career, but she's never been on my podcast before. I don't know why you've never been on my podcast before, but I'm so excited you're here today. So let's just kick it off. Just tell everybody a little bit about yourself. I gave a very big picture, Patricia. Take us down into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, well, it is super special for me to be doing this podcast with you. And so for my background, I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, healthy cooking expert. I'm also a mother. And while I originally grew up on the East Coast, I've been living in Los Angeles for a long time. So that sunshine I find really helps in terms of creating some balance. And like you, Liz, who was my original, as I said, an inspiration and mentor. I've coupled my nutrition degree with communications, which means I've combined nutrition with journalism in a sense. So I write for magazines, I'll do TV segments on healthy eating. And I also work with like-minded companies to do spokesperson work. And I just released this new book, which I am super passionate about.
Yay. And I'm loving the book. I'm holding on to it right now. But why don't you just start us off by telling everybody what is burnout? Kind of define burnout for us.
Absolutely. So the core characteristics of burnout include feeling of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from work, or a cynical or negative attitude towards work, and a drop in professional performance. And while it's been around for a very long time, just in May of 2019, the World Health Organization, or WHO, formally recognized burnout as a syndrome. And like I said, while they just recognize it, it's been around for more than 25 years. And there's something called the Maslach Burnout Inventory, or MBI, which measures your level of burnout. And they really categorize it as an occupational hazard or an occupational syndrome. But as practitioners, I think it's really important, and I found this in writing the book, that we look at the holistic nature of burnout, because it's really your work environment, your personal challenges, and also your personality type. And I kind of visualize a toaster. Sometimes I use this in my presentations, where you've got a toaster with 3 pieces of toast popping up, burnt toast in this case, right? And one is your work, one is your personal life, and one is that personality type. So if you're like me and you're type A personality, you're a people pleaser, you're definitely going to be more prone to burnout.
Interesting. I am type A as well, so I can relate to you on that. You're talking about burnout here. We also use this term stress a lot. So what's the difference between burnout and stress?
Yeah, great question, Liz. And so burnout is when stress has taken such a toll. And I have a comparison grid in my book. So I'll just give you a few examples here. So stress is when you might say, I'm tired, I have no energy. Burnout is when you say, I feel hopeless, I have no energy. Stress might be feeling overwhelmed. Burnout is when you feel empty or numb. Stress might be, I feel this affecting me physically. Burnout is feeling mostly emotional side effects. So the list goes on, but it's really when stress has taken such a toll that you're just like, I can't anymore, but you might still be needing to operate, but you're kind of just going through the motions at that point. And I think it's really important to stress here that stress is unlikely to turn into burnout when you have adequate support available. And that's why, in addition to the lifestyle advice I give in my book and the food advice, there's a whole list at the end, which has hotlines, organizations, other podcasts to help you get that support you need so that it doesn't get worse.
And you yourself have gone through this experience of burnout. I mean, that's why you wrote the book, right?
Exactly. Yes, I have been there firsthand, and I can tell you it's exhausting, it's alienating, it's numbing, it downright sucks. So you want me to share my experience?
Give us the Reader's Digest. Yeah. What happened to you that you got burnout?
Yeah, well, it was about 4 years ago, and my daughter was 6 months old, and I was in Sedona, Arizona. Have you ever been to Sedona?
I have. It's beautiful. Yeah.
It is, and it has these incredible red rocks, and it's kind of this magical healing place. And I think because I was there, I just started to unwind, and kind of unwinding to the point where then I felt like I can't wind up again. I just started to relax and reflect on things. And I realized, like, the past 5 years of my life, both personally and professionally, it was just challenge after challenge after challenge. It had manifested as fears and uncertainty, sleepless nights, headaches, stomach pain. And at that point in life, I realized, like, everything worked out. Everything I was so worried about worked out. I had, a beautiful blended family. I had a wonderful stepson. After years of IVF, I had a beautiful daughter. But instead of feeling this elation, I was completely depleted. I was completely exhausted. And I realized I needed a back to basics simplification plan, which for me was simplifying everywhere I could, prioritizing my own well-being, and really reevaluating what was most important to me. And it worked. I started after a few months to have more energy, that creativity started to come back. And I'm not going to pretend I do it perfectly. I still have moments of stress and moments of anxiety, but overall, I've learned some tools so that it doesn't get too big. And overall, I have a lot more joy and balance in my life than I did before that experience.
And the experience must have been so profound that you decided to write a book about it. Tell us about the book.
Yeah. So, in going through this myself, I started to talk to other women about it, other colleagues, other close friends. And as soon as I started to open up, they started sharing their experience. They either were in the midst of burnout, or they had a hard time in their life where they were sharing about it. And I started to realize, they and I had really bottled it up for so long. So it got me interested. And I started researching the topic, and I realized that burnout is an epidemic in this country, especially for women. And a 2021 Gallup poll showed that right now, 1/3 of women in this country report being in full out burnout at work. And that gender gap, I mean, men have burnout too. And I'm not going to belittle that at all, but it's affecting women at higher rates. And that gender gap really widened during the pandemic.
Big time. Yep. I get that. Yep. So you've got this book and like, it's mostly a cookbook. I mean, but there's more to it, right? Than just the recipes.
Right. So I really call it, it's kind of like a 2-in-1. It's part health book and part cookbook, because the first 6 chapters are really a health book. And I dive into the science behind burnout, why and how it affects women differently than men. And I offer burnout busters. And then I have chapters on each of those 4 core ailments that hit us hard when we're experiencing burnout or just stress or being overwhelmed. And that's sleep, immunity, focus, and mood. And so there's chapters on those. And in each of those chapters, I dive into the top foods that are going to help. They each have meal plans. They each have their own strategies. So you can really start with the part of the book that you're most struggling with. And then the last chapter is those 60 plus plant-centric recipes. And they incorporate those healing nutrients, healing foods that are going to help with those 4 core areas of burnout.
And, before we get into the book, I just want you to tell us like the health consequences of burnout, because, as I always say, this is a show about longevity. We want to live longer. And I love how it's 60 plus recipes. Like, okay, so you kind of know my age there. You just gave it away. All right. So 60 plus recipes, but what are those health consequences? Why is it bad? Why can it zap us of good health?
Yeah, well, regardless of gender, burnout is going to take a pretty hefty toll on your health. It can increase your risk for heart disease, for high blood pressure, for type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, for chronic inflammation, possibly autoimmune conditions. It can also increase the likelihood of alcohol and substance abuse, and it can even create broken relationships. So talking about longevity, it takes a toll on your longevity and your quality of life.
And we know, you mentioned relationships. We know that it's not just diet and physical activity that fuel longevity. It's also the communities you live in, the relationships you have, that sense of belonging. So you mentioned it can destroy a relationship. That could really have a negative impact on your longevity, on your overall health, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it really can impact every area of your life. A broken relationship is going to affect you on a daily basis for the rest of your life.
So you're going to bust the burnout, and we're going to talk about that. And we can't get into every tip in the book, obviously, because I want people actually to get your book. And if you go to the show notes from today's show, everybody, you can, I'll give you links over to Patricia's book, From Burnout to Balance. But why don't you just kind of share some top level tips for busting burnout? And on page 29, you have this great list. It's like your back to basics food solutions. So just give us kind of an overview, some tips for busting burnout.
Yeah. So, let me share with you 2 of those back to basic food solutions. So one is to prioritize plants. The plan in the book is really heavy on plants. Of course, we think of fruits and vegetables. That also includes nuts, seeds, beans, whole grains. You do not have to go vegan. The recipes in the book are very heavy with plants, also with the exception of eggs, dairy, although they also have dairy alternatives if you want to go that route, and then seafood. And that's because they offer unique attributes that are going to help with these things. And you can have, other types of animal protein in your diet, but I find that we're getting so much of that already. It's really on the plant side of things that we're falling short. In fact, 90% of Americans aren't meeting those plant recommendations. So I really say prioritize plants. And then another back to basic solutions is finding your balance in the kitchen, because the last thing you want is added stress on your plate. So if you love cooking, and we saw this with the pandemic, right? If making sourdough bread on the weekend is a way to recharge you and is a creative activity and you want to try new things in the kitchen, go for it. But if that stresses you out, if just the idea of following a recipe, going to the grocery store, buying the ingredients, cooking it, cleaning up, stresses you out and you just want to go on a hike, grab your yogurt, grab your granola and find that balance. And that's why with the recipes in the book, depending where you fall, if you want to try a new creative recipe and use that supercharger ingredient and take it to its max, go for it. But I also have time-saving tips, freezer food options, cook once, eat twice, eat 3 times, if that's going to help you reduce the stress in your life.
It's funny you mentioned the pandemic, and during the pandemic, I don't think I've cooked that much in my life. I cook a lot. And I ended up joining masterclass. I got a subscription and I cooked along with some of the chefs. It was really fun. And I did every like virtual cooking class I could get into, I did. Now I've kind of backed off a little bit, trying to get back to quote unquote normal. But yeah, so just that's a little aside. Anyway, so you talk in the book about mood, sleep, immunity, and focus. And these are so, so important. I want to maybe just start with mood. Okay. You say a healthy mood. This is interesting. You say in the book that a healthy mood and a healthy gut starts in the kitchen. So I want you to elaborate on that. And you also say that whole foods make a whole person. Whole foods make a whole person. I love that. So talk us through a little bit about this connection between what we eat and our mood.
Yeah. So, you think of what we eat affecting our mood. I have found when I had stomach ailments, when I was in the midst of burnout, it was my mood affecting my gut. So it goes both ways, and it can start in the kitchen. And so there are certain nutrients and certain foods that can help you maintain or create that healthy gut brain axis. And so, for example, in the top 25 list, bananas have vitamin B6 for serotonin. Avocados have magnesium that help reduce anxiety. Strawberries have vitamin C to help stabilize your mood. And these feel-good foods, they do all sorts of things. So they can counteract the negative effects of stress hormones. They can keep your blood sugar levels more stable so you don't get hangry and sabotage your day. They can help your brain with those happy hormones, like I mentioned, like serotonin and dopamine. And they can help feed your microbiome, and the microbiome is literally trillions of microbes in the community of good bacteria that live in our gut. And they impact everything from how our digestive system functions to how we feel as well. Now, according to the American Gut Project, eating 30 different plants a week can make for a healthier microbiome and a healthier mood as compared to eating 10 plants or less a week. And I know you're a plant-focused person as well.
Well, that's so interesting. Okay, so 30 plants a week, this is the American Gut Project, is better than 10 plants a week. We're talking variety, not amount, a variety of plants, because we have all these bacteria in our gut. They eat different things. They love fiber. We know that. So the more plants and the more variety you're saying, the better. And that healthy gut is really going to tie into that healthy mood, right?
Absolutely. And then going back to your other comment about the whole food makes a whole person, so as tempting as it might be when we're stressed out or even in full on burnout, to go for those sugary foods or those comfort foods or those high salty snack foods, it's profound the changes when you just stick with the basics. And so the food plan in the book is really eating a variety of those foods. And like we just talked about, a variety of plant-based foods that are as unprocessed as possible, that have those core nutrients that are going to help create a much better feeling for all those areas like mood and immunity. And then also keeping mealtime simple is a key aspect of that as well.
You mentioned processed foods. I'm going to put a plug in. I know you'll agree with me that there are certain quote unquote processed foods out there that are super healthy, like canned beans, right? Or canned tomatoes, or I guess you could say frozen broccoli. Like all those foods are processed to a degree. I've been to a processing plant where wild blueberries were harvested and then sent over to the plant and frozen, right? So we could put them in our smoothies. So let's put a good plug in for some of those processed plant foods, right? And they're convenient for us. It makes life so much easier.
100% agree. In fact, the food staple shopping list isn't about fresh foods at all. You supplement with fresh foods, but it's all of those foods. It's all of those, convenience. But I still consider frozen broccoli as a whole food. I mean, it's flash frozen. It actually, and all the foods you just named can actually be healthier for you. Like those canned tomatoes, they have more lycopene, an antioxidant, which is going to help in a lot of areas, like being anti-inflammatory. So absolutely. And I also, especially living in Los Angeles, this idea, sure, we use the term unprocessed, but you're absolutely right. There's so many foods that are processed that are very important just from reducing stress and from getting the nutrients you need. And so this idea of an over obsession with clean eating is gonna create more stress in your life. And so it's really, the whole thing is balanced. It's creating that balance. You don't have to eat perfectly, but the more we can incorporate plants in our diet and healthy foods in our diet, frozen broccoli, canned tomatoes, whatever it might be, is really going to put you on that healing journey.
You also talk in the book about the immune system, and there was so much attention on immunity, and there still is during COVID, like those foods we could eat to support a strong and robust immune system. So I want to talk about certain foods that will support a strong immune system. But this was my other question, and I'm wondering if my listeners are thinking of this as well. If we continue to be burned out, okay, we're not addressing stress, we're not addressing burnout. Can the best diet in the world, filled with all these whole plant-based foods, seafood, et cetera, can it counteract that? In other words, like even if we're living in this constant state of burnout, will the healthiest diet in the world help, or is it a bigger story than that?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, it's going to help. It's not going to fix it. The analogy I use in my book is like you could have the latest computer with the biggest hard drive, but if you don't, charge it, update it regularly, it's going to slow down, it's going to freeze, it's going to sometimes stop working. It's like spilling coffee on that motherboard over and over again. It's finally going to short out. And your body, if your body is spending so much energy dealing with stress, it's not going to be able to do those routine immune tasks. And what it can look like, for example, is it could be a reduced ability to defend against those germs, those other invaders. It could be an elevated blood pressure and increased heart rates. It could be higher inflammation levels. More unhealthy habits are going to seep in, like drinking, smoking, maybe skipping meals. And then those immune cells can be so exhausted, they forget what they're even supposed to do. They can engage in actually friendly fire against your body. So while the recipes and the book are fantastic, you could make my tart cherry peppermint tea, and it's going to have components in there that might help you relax. But if you're on your cell phone till 2 a.m, you're probably not going to get a good night's sleep. So that's why the book really looks at those lifestyle factors as well as the foods, because you have to do both.
And so what foods, like give me a few foods that you're like, oh my gosh, this ingredient, this food, whatever is so good for our immune system. There's no magic bullet, right? And we went through that during COVID. Everybody was like, eat this and you're not going to get COVID. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's not that simple. But what are some foods that we know are really going to just say, okay, immune system, I'm here to help. So what are some things we should put on our plates?
Yeah. So, I mean, one that comes to mind with immunity is mushrooms, because it has a slew of nutrients that can really help with immunity, including vitamin D, which we're finding now, because like we get vitamin D from sunshine, mushrooms can actually do the same thing. And that's a nutrient that can help with mood. It can help with immunity. And it's one that a lot of Americans are falling short on.
What's another vitamin D food that we should be putting on the plate or in the glass?
Well, vitamin D fortified foods. So for example, dairy, that's one of the reasons in the book. Also seafood can have vitamin D. And then there's a lot of fortified foods out there. So even if you want to go for a dairy alternative, make sure that it's fortified with vitamin D. Orange juice can be fortified with vitamin D. So that is one nutrient that's really going to help across the board.
And speaking of orange juice, vitamin C is good for immunity. Zinc, I would say red meat is like one of our best sources of zinc, one of our best. Give me a few other zinc foods. If you're not going to eat as much red meat, let's say, and in full disclosure, I am a red meat lover. I don't eat it every day, but I do, add some to my diet because it is so nutrient rich. But if you're not going to eat red meat, where could you get that zinc, let's say?
Yeah. So shellfish is a great example of zinc. And so that's on the top 25 food list for that reason.
Okay, good stuff. I actually, I do personally take a few supplements. I take C, I take zinc, and I take vitamin D, and I take a probiotic. And I feel like those, and I take them really with my immune system in mind. Do you take any supplements? I'm curious.
I do take a multi, and the multi does have vitamin D3 in it. And we've talked about this. I think dietitians have this core talking point that is our belief, a supplement is exactly that. It's a great supplement to your diet. As much as you can focus on those whole food nutrients, you get that holistic of the different nutrients in foods that can act, synergistically together. But it's great to also have that backup, that insurance plan.
Yeah, I like it. A little backup. Good stuff. So I want to take a little break and share a recipe. I was looking through the book and I love your recipe. It's on page 116 for golden carrot spice muffins. And I want you to just sort of talk us through like what's in that recipe. How do you make those muffins? I love muffins. And then explain how this recipe would be sort of an anti-burnout recipe. How does it fit into your plan?
Yeah, I love those golden carrot spice muffins. They've got a nice balance of the sweetness and then the spices, and then it's a gorgeous orange color, partly due to the turmeric in them, and then also because of those carrots. So the ingredients, so you're going to start with all-purpose flour. But that being said, tips along the way, you can actually substitute a whole wheat pastry flour 1-for-1 for that all-purpose flour. It's going to add some extra fiber to the muffins. But again, if you don't have that on hand in your pantry, you can also use the all-purpose flour. It also has oat bran in it. Oat bran is going to add a nice amount of fiber in there, and it also meshes really well with those spices. So it's going to have some baking powder, as most muffins do. And then those spices are a combination of ground turmeric, cinnamon, cardamom, and then some black pepper, which might surprise you. But it adds a hint of heat, and it also promotes the bioavailability of that turmeric. So it has that anti-inflammatory benefit. For the sweetness, adding some honey. There's some unrefined coconut oil in there, some Greek yogurt, which is that calcium-rich yogurt. It's going to provide some moistness. And then it's got eggs, vanilla extract, the grated carrots, and then an optional supercharger is those walnuts. And those walnuts are certainly going to add some crunch, but also some healthy fats, some protein, and a little more fiber.
And walnuts are heart healthy. And I know that February is heart month. So hooray for walnuts. Do you know that when I left CNN, you guys, I worked at CNN from 87 to 92. See, I'm dating myself here. And when I first moved back up to Boston, the Walnut Marketing Board hired me to be their spokesperson. And back in the day, people were so afraid of nuts. They were so afraid of the fat in nuts. Of course, we know now it's the healthy fat, the heart healthy fat, the brain healthy fat. I can remember talking to so many people back then, doing all these media interviews, kind of like what you do, Patricia. And they were like, what? You could eat nuts? And now, of course, everybody loves nuts. Can you believe that? Like, this wasn't even that long ago. People were super paranoid about eating nuts. And now you have it in your list of superchargers, right?
No fat food, low fat food. The whole idea was nuts, right? I mean, come on.
It was nuts, pun intended.
It was nuts. Yeah, no, healthy fats are so important. And so that's why also I have olive oil in the book. Like I mentioned in this recipe, there's actually the unrefined coconut oil. And so it's so important for our brain health and for our mood and for everything. Absolutely. So those healthy fat foods are key.
And then, so this recipe is easy, right? It's the dry ingredients, it's the wet ingredients, mix them together, bake it. You've got these yummy golden carrot spice muffins. Do you know what I would like to add to this? Which is probably not, well, I guess it could fit into your plan, is dark chocolate chips. Not too many of them, just a little handful. Wouldn't that be good?
Yes, that would be delicious. In fact, in the banana bread recipe, my supercharger is the dark chocolate chips because, they have some antioxidants, but also, feel good foods are important too for our overall balance.
I like that. I like that. Hey, how old is your daughter now?
She is going to be 5 soon. She's 4 right now. Yep.
Wow. Do I hear her playing in the background? I heard something.
Yeah. You know what? I didn't know if I should stop or not, Liz. So
no, let her play. Let her play.
My dog. No, it's my dog. He's just making these noises. Yeah.
That's fine. Your dog. I thought it was your daughter. And what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Labradoodle.
Oh, they're cute. And what's his or her name?
That's Pablo. Yeah.
Pablo can play. Let Pablo play.
Okay.
I'm not worried about Pablo. I was thinking, is your daughter home? Okay. So she's not. All right. We did our spice muffins. They sound phenomenal. And we've talked about mood. We've talked about immunity. Let's talk about focus, paying attention. I feel like we are staring at our screens all day. And I want to know, how does burnout impact our ability to focus, our overall brain health, and any suggestions from your kitchen for feeding the brain and enhancing our focus?
Yeah. So, burnout, it creates this mental fatigue or brain fog. And a 2014 research review concluded burnout can impact our cognitive function. It creates less creativity, struggling with problem solving, memory issues, attention lapses. And if you look at a brain scan, actually, of somebody who's lived through trauma and someone who's dealing with burnout, they look practically identical. So it can change the brain. You can also reverse it. So that's really key here in terms of what you eat and what you do. And I find one of the things is this reducing decision fatigue because there's so many questions. Guess, Liz, how many decisions the average person makes in a day?
Oh gosh, decisions. 2,000?
35,000 decisions a day. The average person. So, talk about decision fatigue, right? So the more you can streamline your meals, the more I even say, like in the book, streamlining your purchases. I have the same shoes I buy for my daughter for school every 3 months once she outgrows them. The more you can reduce this decision making process, the better it's going to be. But you also mentioned food. So, again, there's a list of 25. I'm just going to share 3 with you, focus foods. Blueberries. Blueberries have that vitamin C, can help protect against dementia. They also have flavonoids, which can improve memory and delay cognitive decline. We're talking about those healthy fats, olives and olive oils, really important for brain function and memory. They also have vitamin E, which can help protect those brain cells. And then let's go back to the walnuts, right? They've got polyphenols to support memory, protein for a healthy brain and nervous system, and also that fiber, which is going to help maintain our blood sugar stability.
I like that. So, and you've got lists in the book then, so people can refer to those lists and say, I need to really work on my focus. Here's my foods, right?
Yeah. So to make it easier, each of those ailment chapters, like I've got my top 25 foods for mood, for immunity, for focus, and for sleep. So you can just look at that. And again, it's not going to stick if you don't enjoy it. So just pull those foods that, you really enjoy and understand why they might be helping, or you might be intrigued to try a new food. But if you really hate a food, there's other ones you can go for.
Now, you mentioned sleep, and I know a lot of people are sleep deprived. So sleep deprivation, very bad for our health. I know when it comes to weight maintenance, people who are trying to lose weight or maintain a healthy body weight, if they have chronic lack of sleep, that can make that really challenging. It really interrupts and interferes with the way we handle calories and the way we store fat and the way we burn energy. And so lack of sleep can really trash our health. So anything in terms of sleep, like obviously don't have a cup of coffee at 10 o'clock at night. At least I would never do that. What can we do to support our sleep? How can we eat to have better sleep?
Right. And National Sleep Foundation says 63% of Americans aren't getting enough rest. In addition to like challenges with maintaining a healthy weight, it can actually increase depression. It can impair your immunity. It can lead to diabetes and heart disease. So lifestyle factors, there's a long list of lifestyle factors in the book that can help. One could just be as simple as journaling those anxious thoughts in your head before you go to bed, because writing them down can help release them. There's also things like essential oils, like lavender. You can even spray some on your pillow, but they actually have been scientifically shown to help you relax. Deep breathing exercises, which I have in the book. And then tech can actually help here because there's actually a lot of sleep apps that have different components that can help you get a better night's sleep.
And then what about diet? Oh, and by the way, I'm never going to put lavender on my pillow because that would create a huge amount of stress in my life because I do not like scents. Unscented detergent. Thank you very much. Yes, I could never do a scent, but that's me. My whole family, we don't like smells. Oh, if I have a candle burning, it's going to be like a evergreen or a foresty smell. But it was so funny. I was actually with a friend of mine who lives in LA and we were shopping. This is like over the summer. She was visiting me here actually. And I wanted to get a hostess gift for a friend. And I said, oh, let's get her a candle. And we're smelling all these candles. And I'm like, picking up all these evergreen and foresty smells. And she's like, oh my gosh, that smells like medicine, like cough medicine or something. She goes, these are awful. So anyway, I'm digressing. Smells are very unique to us.
No, but it's so important because everything about this is unique. So you got to find what works for you. And if scents are the opposite, they're doing the opposite thing, that is not a solution for you. And I wonder now if you're a super taster because you're more maybe affected by the smell of things if you're a super taster. So that's an interesting thing as well. But yeah.
I would say, I have my taste buds, I think are very discerning. I'd say like things don't taste bad to me, but I can always pick out like the nuances in a recipe. I'm like, ooh, what am I getting here? That's thyme. I think I'm pretty good at, just picking up flavors. But so, yes, so sleepy time. Are there certain things we should snack on? If we have a nighttime snack, or you've got this sleepy time snacks in the book, page 100, but are there certain foods that we should be again, eating to bring sleep on versus to, sabotage it?
Yeah. So again, that top 25 list, but I'll just, share a few with you. So kiwi, for example, that vitamin C we're seeing throughout, but I call out, why in each section vitamin C helps with sleep differently than why it helps with mood, differently than why it helps with immunity, but it helps across the board. So that vitamin C in kiwi, it's for serotonin production. Also has potassium for sleep quality, peanut butter. I'm a big peanut butter fan. It's going to add tryptophan. It's going to add vitamin B6 and magnesium, all going to help with sleep quality. And then there's research on tart cherries and tart cherry juice. Melatonin, again, it's going to add, and potassium, all good for sleep quality. And then you mentioned, the obvious foods you want to avoid, like alcohol, caffeine, heavy foods, spicy foods. That's all going to interact with your quality of sleep.
The tart cherries are interesting. I was invited by the Montmorency tart cherry, choose cherry people to do like a virtual yoga class yesterday. So I'm like, I'll hop into that. And they had sent along all these foods that have tart cherries, like tart cherry juice and dried tart cherries and snack bars with tart cherries. And there is some really interesting research on muscle recovery, but also so many health benefits, including sleep, which is so weird to me. Like, why would, the components of tart cherries help us sleep? Isn't that interesting? Like, more than I do, but it's just so fascinating how certain foods really have these superpowers.
It's absolutely true and absolutely fascinating. And that's why, going back to the supplement or different supplements, great insurance policy, but we're still learning about these synergistic things in foods, how they work together to create these amazing, super helpful additions to our life.
You had a brain freeze. Give her more tart cherries. So do you have a favorite recipe? It's never a fair question, but do you have a favorite recipe in the book? If so, maybe it depends on the season. What is it?
That's hard. That's choosing between my babies. But, there is one recipe in the book that I make over and over again. It's kind of my go-to recipe, especially when I'm hosting, because it's a one pot dinner. And that's the salmon, the sheet pan salmon, fingerling potatoes, and asparagus with citrus miso sauce, because it's like a full, complete meal all on one sheet pan. It's a celebration of vegetables. The supercharger in this ingredient, which is optional, is the sugar snap peas. So I'll often add those in as well for more nutrients. And this is such a nutritious dish. I break out in the recipes excellent source of or good source of different nutrients per serving. And this is an excellent and good source of 27 different essential nutrients. So talk about a power dish. And you can it's so easy just to roast the salmon with the vegetables. It tastes great. But then this citrus miso sauce, it really takes it to a whole new level. So in this sauce, it's fresh orange juice, fresh lime juice, some miso paste, which is good for the gut and the microbiome, some olive oil, some maple syrup, garlic, salt, and then a serrano chili, which gives it really nice kick of heat. And that's just extra thinly sliced. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, easy presentation. So when I'm hosting people, again, like you want to enjoy it. You don't want to be, frazzled in the kitchen trying to do too many things.
Oh, I will have to try that. It's fun whenever I have people over for dinner and, I haven't had I don't entertain as much as I used to just with the whole, COVID thing, but I always love to pick up a new cookbook and make something from it. So I will try that. The next time I have people over. So I made zucchini and black bean chilaquiles skillet. I hope I'm saying chilaquiles right. And this is a Mexican dish, which is so pretty to look at. And I made it. I'm telling you, Patricia, it's so good. So I made half a recipe because I was here alone at the apartment. And then my husband, Tim, he was traveling. He came back early, unexpectedly. He's like, "What's for dinner?" I'm like, dude, like it's like, I didn't know you were going to be here. This wasn't part of my plan. But so I gave him the leftovers of this recipe, but it's made. So basically you cook up eggs and, if you like them sunny side up, they're beautiful in this dish, but basically it's a dish with zucchini and frozen corn kernels. So convenient. And you saute up those veggies and then you add some black beans, canned black beans. You add corn tortilla chips, which, they're a whole grain. And then you add some green enchilada sauce. I could not find it at Trader Joe's, which is my local. What did I use? Oh, what was it? Oh, tomatillo sauce I used, which had a nice kick to it. And then you add a little bit of cheese. I just did shredded cheddar. And then you add cherry tomatoes and cilantro, and you squeeze lime onto it. You add avocado as that sort of optional supercharger. And it's just like this really fun recipe. I love it because you got the veggies, but you have the chips in there and they kind of soften in there a little bit. And then you top it with the eggs. Beautiful. And so easy. I couldn't believe it. You got some green onion, I think, in there. It's just delish. Absolutely love this recipe. I'm going to share it on the blog because you said I could. And I took some pretty pictures, but I love this recipe and so simple, and it's funny because I get cookbooks and I'm very particular. I'm like, oh gosh, these recipes better work. I mean, this was like, it's a perfect recipe.
Oh, great. Oh my God. So great to hear that, especially from you. Yeah. Chilaquiles, if people aren't.
Oh, chilaquiles. Oh gosh, I said it wrong. Did I say it wrong? Chilaquiles. Oh, I'm such a nerd. I can't believe I said it wrong. Chilaquiles.
I always pronounce things wrong. But what it is it's a traditional Mexican dish and it's often a breakfast dish. So, but it's great for dinner too. And like you said, it's a one pot dish. It takes 30 minutes to make. So it's great for weeknights, because it's really tasty, but it's not going to take so long to make, which is key to preventing stress and burnout, right?
When you look at different traditional cuisines, like I'm thinking of shakshuka, which is very popular in the Middle East. This is almost like the equivalent of shakshuka, their version of shakshuka.
It is, absolutely. You explained it right on. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's so great to hear.
You know what I would do differently next time? And this is nothing that would change the original recipe. Instead of I just used plain corn tortillas, I would use sort of those zesty lime tortillas. And wouldn't that give it a nice kick to it? If you can find those at the market, I think that would be really good.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great tip. I might have to try that too.
Recipes are really like this foundation, right? So we start with a recipe and then you can make it your own, play around with it. Like if you don't like cilantro, just use parsley. If you don't want to use black beans and you have pinto beans, use the pinto beans. You don't have the cheese Patricia calls for, use a different cheese, right? You want to use summer squash instead of zucchini, the yellow summer squash, go for it. So it's very adaptable, I would say.
Yes. Yeah. And that's key. And that's why with the pantry staples, using what you have on hand, the last thing you want is to be wanting to cook something and be like, oh, I got to go to the store and get another ingredient. Learning how to just use what you have on hand is key. Absolutely.
Right. So, do you think the fountain of youth, because this show, of course, is about longevity, do you think the fountain of youth exists in some form? In other words, can people age backwards if they live a healthy lifestyle, if they turn burnout into balance? Can you age backwards?
Wow. Well, I don't know if you can age backwards, but I guarantee you can slow the process. You can have more balance and joy in your life. And that is going to increase longevity and quality of life. So it's not necessarily about going backwards if your quality of life sucks and you die maybe before your time. So I think that's key. And we have found though with certain conditions, like even heart disease, that in terms of certain ailments or diseases, those can actually reverse with certain lifestyle behaviors, certain foods. So that is definitely going to help in terms of that fountain of youth or longevity.
Good. I like that. So we're turning burnout into balance. You've got so many great tips in the book, so many great recipes. And I feel like we've really just scratched the surface. We never got into sleepy time beverages or anything else. Well, let's wrap it up with a sleepy time beverage, something you could drink at night to kind of bring on sleep and soothe your nerves and help us relax. Anything you might recommend from the book?
Yeah, well, I mentioned it earlier, but that tart cherry chamomile tea, it's basically what it sounds. It's part tart cherry juice and then chamomile tea. And if you don't have the leaves on hand, you can actually just make it easier on yourself and just cut some of those tea bags open and use that. And then the supercharger is actually oat milk, which creates a beautiful, vibrant color and just makes it a little bit more soothing. But that's in the book. And that's one of my favorite, sleepy time soothing drinks. And it's got nutrients in there. The chamomile is going to help with sleep and so forth.
I like that. That sounds really nice. And it sounds like it'll be a pretty beverage. Where, Patricia, can people find you on the web? Where can they find your book? And then where are you on social media? And I'll put all of this in the show notes, but just give us that info now.
Yeah. So my website is patriciabannan.com, my name, and that's AN at the end. It's BANNAN. And Instagram is the same. My handle's at Patricia Bannan. Twitter, I am at Nutrition Go-Go. And then you can get this book, I'm happy to say, everywhere books are sold, including Amazon.
Nutrition Go-Go? Why? Where'd you come up with that?
Okay, so that was not a focused decision. That was actually with some colleagues who, some other dietitians with my first book over 10 years ago. And I was like, I got to get on Twitter. What should my handle be? And it was with Kate Geoghegan and Jackie Nugent. And so it was just a quick decision to go with that handle. And now I'm stuck with it because other people have my name on Twitter. So
people have stolen your name. How dare they?
Yeah. So I am stuck with that Nutrition Go-Go handle.
That is hilarious. Well, I have an AOL account. I try not to use it as much as I used to. And the reason I refuse to give up AOL is because A, I'm a dinosaur, and B, it's my name, Liz Weiss at AOL.com. And I don't want to give that up. It's nostalgic.
It's like a 212 New York phone number, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. And, there's other Liz Weisses out there that are looking to steal my email. I know it. So they're not going to get it. They're not going to get it. Well, Patricia, thank you so much for joining us today. I learned a lot. I love your recipes. I encourage everybody to grab From Burnout to Balance. So thank you for joining us.
Liz, thank you so much for having me on. Career highlight, being able to do this with you after many, many moons ago, learning from you, and I still am. So thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's great. It's great. And to all my listeners, don't forget to head on over to lizshealthytable.com/podcast for the show notes. And, I'm going to share some of these recipes. I'm going to tell you how to get the book. I'm going to link you to Patricia. So be sure to check that out. And, if you love the show, tell a friend about it. And, post a review on iTunes, Apple, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, thanks for listening to Eat, Drink, Live Longer.